Welcome to my channel. Subscribe and enjoy daily stories about cheating, revenge, and relationship advice. I sat at the kitchen table, the hum of the dishwasher blending with the monotonous rhythm of my life. The predictability of my days with Bill had settled into a comfortable but stifling routine. Every morning was the same, the clink of coffee cups, the soft murmur of the radio, and the same predictable conversations. Our marriage, while stable, had grown into a series of mechanical gestures. I glanced at Bill as he read the newspaper, his eyes hidden behind his glasses. His focus was so absorbed in the headlines that he barely noticed me. I sighed, a mixture of frustration and resignation bubbling within me. I loved Bill, but the spark that once ignited our conversations and adventures had dimmed. We no longer laughed together, and our nights were more about finding comfort in sleep than in each other's arms. "Did you see this article about the new tax reforms?" Bill asked, his voice barely lifting from his usual monotone. I shook my head, trying to sound interested. "No, I missed it." "What's it about?" "Nothing much, just the usual changes. It's going to affect our deductions, though." He folded the newspaper and set it aside. "But I'm sure we'll manage." His practical response was a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing inside me. I forced a smile. "I'm sure we will. Anyway, I was thinking of trying that new Italian restaurant for dinner tonight. What do you think?" Bill looked up, his expression indifferent. "Italian sounds fine. We can go if you want." The lack of enthusiasm in his response stung more than I cared to admit. I wanted to shake him, to break through the complacency that had seeped into every aspect of our lives. Instead, I nodded and changed the subject. "Have you heard from Mark recently?" I know he was traveling for work. Bill's face softened slightly, and he nodded. "Yes, he called last week. He's still out of town but said he'd be back next month." I tried to latch onto the brief moment of warmth, but it quickly faded. The conversation felt like a performance, and I was losing my enthusiasm for the script we had long ago memorized. Later, at work, the monotonous routine continued. The office was quiet, save for the soft clatter of keyboards and occasional murmur of conversations. My co-workers were pleasant but predictable. Their chatter was a backdrop to my own internal discontent. I shuffled through emails and organized files, my mind drifting to thoughts of something, anything, different. Just as I was filing away another stack of paperwork, Darnell walked into the office. His presence was like a breath of fresh air, breaking through the haze of my daily grind. He flashed a charming smile as he passed my desk, and I caught myself smiling back. "Alicia, have you seen the new client brief?" Darnell asked, his tone light and friendly. I shook my head, trying to sound casual. "Not yet." "Did you need it?" "Yeah, just wanted to go over a few details before our meeting this afternoon." "Mind if I grab it from you?" "Sure, it's right here," I said, handing him the file. Our fingers brushed briefly, and I felt a jolt of electricity. As Darnell flipped through the documents, he glanced up with a grin. "You know, I think you're the only person who can make organizing files look interesting." I laughed, a genuine sound that felt rare these days. "I'll take that as a compliment. Or maybe it's just the way you're looking at them." "Maybe both," he said with a wink before turning his attention back to the papers. The interaction left me with a flutter of excitement. Darnell's charm and easy confidence were a stark contrast to the routine of my days with Bill. As the hours passed, I found myself looking forward to our next exchange, a small rebellion against the predictability that had begun to define my life. The monotony of my existence was still there, but now there was a new thread woven into the fabric of my days. And with it came a sense of longing, a desire for something more than the predictable patterns of my current life. Despite my best efforts, the routine of my marriage felt increasingly suffocating. I threw myself into various activities, trying to rekindle a spark that seemed to have extinguished. I suggested we try new restaurants, took up painting, and even planned a weekend getaway. Each idea was met with Bill's polite but disinterested response. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, I could hear the familiar drone of Bill's voice from the living room. He was absorbed in a sports podcast, his attention seemingly consumed by the latest game scores. I rolled my eyes as I stirred the pot on the stove, feeling a pang of frustration. "Dinner's almost ready," I called out, attempting to inject some enthusiasm into my voice. Bill responded without looking up, "Great. I'll be right there." The conversation that followed was as routine as the rest of our evening. We discussed our days in perfunctory terms and then settled into our usual spots on the couch to watch TV. The distance between us felt palpable, and I found myself growing more restless with each passing day. It was during these restless times that my interactions with Darnell became a cherished escape. Our meetings became a highlight of my week. Each conversation with him was filled with a spark and energy I hadn't felt in years. The way he listened to me, his genuine interest, and the way his eyes lit up when he talked about his passions, it was intoxicating. One afternoon, we met at a small cafe near the office. I arrived early, anxiously scanning the entrance. When Darnell walked in, his presence seemed to brighten the room. He greeted me with that disarming smile of his and took a seat across from me. "Hey, Alicia. You look like you've had a long day," he said, his voice warm and inviting. I sighed and leaned back in my chair. "You have no idea. Everything feels so routine lately. Even my attempts to change things up seem to fall flat." Darnell raised an eyebrow. "Routine can be the hardest thing to break. Maybe you need something more unexpected." "Like what?" I asked, intrigued. He grinned mischievously. "Like a spontaneous adventure. Something to shake things up a bit." We laughed, the sound of it feeling like a breath of fresh air. Our conversation shifted to lighter topics, but the underlying tension of our mutual attraction was palpable. Darnell's touch was lingering, his fingers brushing mine as he gestured. The proximity was electrifying, and I found myself drawn to him more with each passing minute. As our relationship grew, our encounters became more frequent and intense. Darnell's charm made it impossible to resist, and our secret rendezvous became a thrilling escape from the tedium of my daily life. The flirtation between us escalated into more intimate exchanges, and our meetings were laced with a tension that was both exhilarating and dangerous. One evening, we met at a secluded park, away from the prying eyes of colleagues and family. The park was quiet, the only sounds were the rustling leaves and distant chatter. We sat on a bench, the space between us shrinking with every passing minute. "You know, Alicia," Darnell said softly, his voice low, "I've never felt this way before. There's something about you that just clicks." I looked into his eyes, feeling the pull of his words and the gravity of our situation. "I feel the same way, Darnell. But I'm scared. What if we're just chasing a fantasy?" Darnell took my hand in his touch sending a shiver down my spine. "We won't know unless we try. But I promise, whatever happens, I'm here for you." His promise was both comforting and frightening. I was caught between the desire for something more and the guilt of the life I was leaving behind. Yet, with each secret meeting, each stolen touch, I found it increasingly difficult to resist the lure of what Darnell offered, a chance at something beyond the confines of my predictable existence. The thrill of our clandestine meetings only deepened my dissatisfaction with my current life, and the more I indulged in our secret affair, the more I felt trapped between the comfort of my stable life and the exhilarating promise of something new. As my relationship with Darnell grew deeper, so did the complexity of our situation. We were no longer just enjoying secret rendezvous, we were starting to think about our future together. Our discussions turned from casual flirtations to serious plans, and with each conversation, the stakes felt higher. One evening, we met at a quaint, dimly lit restaurant, a favorite spot for us to escape the prying eyes of our everyday lives. We had chosen a secluded corner booth, the soft glow of candlelight casting shadows on our faces. As we sipped our drinks, the conversation took a more serious turn. "So, where do we go from here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Darnell leaned in, his eyes intense. "I've been thinking a lot about that. If we're serious about this, we need to have a plan. We can't just keep sneaking around forever. I nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and anxiety. What kind of plan are you talking about? Darnell looked around to ensure no one was listening before continuing. We need to think about our financial situation. I mean, starting over won't be cheap. We've both got commitments, bills, mortgages, you name it. I swallowed, realizing the gravity of what he was suggesting. You're right. But stealing from our spouses, isn't that a bit extreme? Darnell's gaze was unwavering. Extreme, maybe. But we have to consider our future. Think about it, if we're truly committed, we need to be practical. It's not just about the money, it's about securing a future where we can be together without financial strain. His logic was persuasive, and the idea of a future together began to seem more tangible, though still deeply unsettling. Okay, let's say we do this. How would we even begin? Darnell smiled, a mixture of confidence and caution. We'd need to be careful. Start small, maybe look at joint accounts, credit cards. Just enough to give us a cushion without raising suspicion. I felt a knot in my stomach. What if we get caught? We won't if we're smart about it, Darnell assured me. We'll keep everything discreet and plan every move meticulously. Our priority is to make sure no one suspects a thing. As the evening wore on, our conversation turned to logistical details. We made lists and discussed potential risks, trying to find a balance between our desires and the practicalities of our plan. Each decision felt like a step further into a world of deceit, but the thrill of what we were planning kept me engaged. In the days that followed, we implemented our plan with careful precision. We established secret meetings to discuss our next steps and shared strategies for avoiding detection. Every interaction was calculated, every financial move deliberate. One afternoon, as we met in a secluded park, Darnell laid out a series of documents and spreadsheets on a picnic table. Here's what we've got so far, he said, pointing to a detailed list of expenses and potential income. We'll need to be vigilant and track every cent. It's a big step, but it's necessary. I studied the documents, feeling a mix of dread and anticipation. This is more complicated than I imagined. Are we really ready for this? Darnell took my hand, his touch reassuring. We're in this together. As long as we stay focused and careful, we'll make it work. It's about securing our future. His words were both comforting and disconcerting. I was torn between the promise of a new life and the moral implications of our actions. Yet, the more we planned, the more I felt the gravity of our situation. We were no longer just two people in an affair, we were becoming conspirators in a scheme that had the potential to unravel everything we had built. Our secret became a complex web of deception, and the lines between right and wrong blurred further with each passing day. The excitement of our plans was intertwined with a growing sense of anxiety, and the reality of our choices began to set in. As we moved forward, I couldn't help but wonder if we were setting ourselves up for a fall that would change everything forever. The excitement of our meticulously planned affair began to fade, replaced by a nagging sense of dread. As Darnell and I delved deeper into our scheme, the weight of our actions grew heavier. We were careful, or so we thought, but the cracks in our carefully constructed facade were beginning to show. One evening, I came home early from work, eager to unwind and perhaps talk to Bill about the evening's plans. The house was eerily quiet. As I stepped inside, I noticed that something was off. The living room lights were on, but there was no sign of Bill. My heart began to race as I approached our bedroom. I was met with the sight of Bill, sitting at the edge of the bed with a stack of papers in his hands. He looked up as I entered, his expression a mixture of hurt and anger. "Alicia, we need to talk." The papers on the bed were incriminating, photos of me with Darnell, texts, and even financial records that pointed to suspicious transactions. My breath caught in my throat. "Bill, don't," Bill interrupted, his voice tight with emotion. "I've seen enough. I don't know what you were thinking, but I've had enough of this deception." I could barely form a coherent response. The weight of my choices hit me with full force. "Bill, I didn't want this." "I thought what?" Bill's voice cracked. That you could have a little affair and everything would be fine. That you could steal from us and not get caught. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. I stood frozen, dreading what might be waiting outside. Bill's eyes were cold, and his disappointment was palpable. Bill stormed to the door and opened it. To my shock, Mary Alice stood there, her face a mask of fury. She had clearly been waiting for this confrontation. "Mary Alice, what are you doing here?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I'm here because I found something that doesn't add up," Mary Alice said, stepping inside. "It looks like you've been busy, Alicia." Bill and Mary Alice exchanged a look of shared understanding, their eyes locking in silent communication. My heart sank as I realized the full extent of the situation. They had discovered not only my affair but also the financial manipulations we had planned. Mary Alice turned to me, her voice steady despite her anger. "We've been tracking the strange transactions and odd behavior. We had a feeling something was going on, but this." She held up a file, similar to the one Bill had, containing evidence of our affair and financial misdeeds. "This is more than we ever imagined. How could you do this?" "I'm sorry," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I was just what?" Mary Alice's voice was tinged with bitterness. "Searching for excitement. Did you even consider the consequences?" Before I could answer, Darnell's name came up in the conversation. It became clear that Bill and Mary Alice had pieced together the connection and had been working together to uncover the full extent of our betrayal. As the realization of my actions and their repercussions set in, the confrontation grew more intense. The conversations with Darnell and the plans we had made seemed distant now, overshadowed by the reality of the situation. The comfort of our secret life was gone, replaced by the stark consequences of our choices. Bill and Mary Alice were resolute in their actions. They had evidence of our plans and the financial discrepancies, and they were determined to hold us accountable. The confrontation left me reeling, unable to escape the weight of my decisions. The once exciting prospect of a new life with Darnell now seemed like a distant fantasy, overshadowed by the reality of betrayal and the impending fallout. As the door closed behind Mary Alice and Bill, I was left alone with the stark realization that my pursuit of excitement had led to a devastating unraveling of my life. The consequences were far-reaching, and the road ahead was filled with uncertainty and regret.